Hey everybody. So it looks like I was not in, the right mode. So anyway, welcome to Behind the Scenes. I am your host and dungeon master, Cranio Dad, and tonight we will be going through the episode from Friday, which was subtitled "Green Nest Still in Flames," and we'll talk about all that happened. But thank you for those who are here joining us. Sorry I got a little bit of a late start tonight. Just trying to get some other things taken care of. Do I have a decent audio check from the audience? Audio check. Audio check. Audio check. Audio. All right. So let's dive on in. So what I like to do is on the Monday that follows a game, I like to talk a little bit about what all happened. What did we notice? What did we see? What did we hear? And what did we experience together, not just as the people at my table, but as the audience as well. So let's kind of walk through what the intent for this particular evening was, and we'll go forward from there. Our party, our adventurers had recently returned from saving the mill from what they thought was going to be utter destruction. And they were able to leave one of the people alive and bring back a prisoner, which had been requested to them of Governor Nighthill. Now, in the idea of expediency, I decided to dispense with the small side quest of letting them interrogate for far too long, and introduce the dragon as an element. And I think that part of the struggle for how I was trying to keep this on track was I think I made the dragon encounter a little too short, but I think it's wound up serving its purpose in the end, without my desire to make it do so, or without my intent at least. So the players were introduced to Lenathan, an adult blue dragon who had her egg stolen by Mondrath. And, well, I think we changed her name. Mondrath is somebody else. But had her egg stolen and was attacking the town of Greenest because she wanted her egg back. And I introduced the idea of how age affects dragons differently than other things on the ethereal plane, and that there was some rumor of Tiamat and things along those lines. I'm starting to build the hooks that are going to get really dug in deep in just a few more sessions, if not starting the next session. And because we had a person who couldn't make it, we wound up bringing the party down by one, and I think that ultimately caused some things to happen, which we'll get to. So the bard made a deal with the adult blue dragon Lenathan that they would try to retrieve her eggs in 2 days, and she licked his ear and she essentially marked him. That way she could communicate with him as well as track him. It took me a little bit to realize what was going on, and that was with intent. This is my own flavor, adding a little bit of pressure to the party to see what they can do when they are well, for the lack of all things, when they're feeling pressured from outside forces and seeing what truly drives their players. So they traveled. They witnessed a trial by combat where Escobar the Red was struck down by a half-dragon champion. And because of that, 4 more villagers were killed. That will come into play in the very near future. It was one of those things that there were some opportunities there, and I think they were just a little bit befuddled with what all was going on. I think that in real time, a lot of us have been having a lot of issues with lack of sleep, exhaustion. There's been some illnesses going around. I'm sure all of you have been experiencing that in some way, shape, or form. And so I think by keeping the op-tempo from the get-go, jumping right on in, it caused the players at the table to be a little bit clouded in judgment. And I think that was actually a good thing, because in reality, these events were taking place between the hours of between 12 and 1. All of this was taking place in the early part of the morning. and the players were nearing a point of exhaustion. They only had a couple more hours left, and I was going to have to give them exhaustion. For the non-D&D players out there, what exhaustion does is there's different levels of exhaustion going from 1 to 6. It mimics the full idea of being, exactly what the word sounds, exhausted. Your advantage, or your checks, your ability checks, you wind up getting disadvantage on them. And if you think about it, if you've been up for a day or a day and a half, or when I was younger, like 3 or 4 days, you start to lose your sense of touch, your sense of taste, your sense of hearing gets a little acute, your sense of smell gets off, and all of that is taken into play with the idea of having a disadvantage on all your checks. Going all the way to level 6, which means you're dead, like dead, beyond return dead. So when a party has been through intense combat for too long a period of time, or they've been traveling too much, or they haven't purposefully or by means of my own been able to take a break, that causes them to receive points of exhaustion, which can only be gotten rid of through either extreme magical means or a long rest. So they witnessed a trial by combat, or war by proxy, where Escobar the Red fell. That will come into play later as well. And they were finally able to get the chance to sleep for a little bit. They found out that their party member was still, who was already previously exhausted because of an amulet that he put on, was unable to join them on the journey. So the 3 of them headed out in search of the spoken about camp. They came across the rear guard of the entire troop of raiders. And that's when they ascertained the idea that they do have different uniforms that they just weren't wearing, or at least the ones that attacked the town were not. Because they asked me a lot of the right questions, but just not the right time. They're asking about uniforms, about language, is there any code that they were using, and all those were great questions for the players to ask, and I think it really helped them have a little bit of confidence. I also think that confidence was a little bit ill-gotten, based on the fact that there were a couple comments made, well, at one point we took on 36, why can't we take that on again? But I think they were rightfully steering themselves in a direction where they realized that the DM, this guy, is probably not going to let that happen again. So they followed the trail, they got to the tree, they met the rear guard, they defeated the rear guard, and I was using a modified version of stealth and hide for the kobolds. I was the ones that were attacking them with crossbows. I figured that the grass was high enough, the kobolds were, they were average height, and the players were disoriented enough that it kind of made sense for their stealth rolls for me to do what I did. I was consistently rolling higher than they could have rolled. And one of the things that I think a lot of us often forget is that when it comes to ability checks, a natural 20 is not an automatic success. For ability checks, a natural 20 is still a 20. You still have to add your modifier and find out. And when I was doing the math and I was consistently rolling above 29 for the stealth checks, there was no way that even on a natural 20 that they would have seen them. You did not have much confidence in your plan. I was constantly looking for a reason not to walk the camp filled with enemies. Very true. And I think that, Gitchwish, you were playing your character extremely well. I think that short of absolutely saying, I don't think this is the way we should be going, that you were playing exactly how Quabrudlum, I'm getting there, would have played. And I think I wanted to give you inspiration for it, but to be honest with you guys, I was also extremely exhausted. And I think that my head was a little bit clouded, but I wanted to give you inspiration for some of the comments that you had, and that may be a retro thing that I do when we get back together, because I think you deserve it. We were joking about it after the stream, but you were talking about how you knew that we weren't going to go back to Waterdeep, but you wanted to put that idea out there. That's exactly what I think Quabrudlum would have done. I think he would have said, okay, this is not a good idea. I think we should just leave. So I do think that you were conveying your lack of confidence in your plan, but I also admire the fact that you stuck it through. So after you guys ran into the rear guard, after the party ran into the rear guard, you guys moved up and you approached the camp. And there's a lot of different ways that this scenario could have gone. Again, this is my third time running the first portion of this campaign. When it when it comes to this particular part, uh, some of the basic approaches are to either sneak in, to sit back and monitor, um, and or to just try to bum rush and realize that they're completely overpowered. And I liked the conversation that the party had. I think that, um, in my opinion, I should have made a little bit more reference to how much further away they probably were having this conversation, that maybe they snuck up and they observed the camp. I wish that they would have done more observation before they had the conversation, but I think that they were getting enough of an idea from what they were seeing and hearing, to take some appropriate action. I really liked the idea of using the cat to go down and Raymond, to go down and investigate a little bit. I think we had to stretch the limits on the math just a tiny bit, but I think that's okay, because one of the things that, as a dungeon master, that I often kind of hold close to the idea of is that just because we have this thing called raw rules as written, that does not necessarily mean that that is Dungeons and Dragons. I was watching Matt Colville the other day, and he actually went on a little rant about this, and I 100% agree with him that the player's handbook is not Dungeons and Dragons, right? It's a book of guidelines. It's a book of ideas. It's a book of what people suggest you should do. In some cases, it takes some of the guesswork out. What is Dungeons and Dragons is what happens here on Friday nights and on Gidge Wish's channel on Wednesday nights, and on Critical Role on Thursday nights, on MCDM on Wednesday nights super late, on a whole bunch of other channels that I follow. That's what Dungeons and Dragons is. It's the interaction, it's the story, it's the ability to take something that sounds so awesome that you have to let it happen and ignore the rules as written sometimes, or to bend them a little bit. And yes, using Raymond and to lighting the fire, that's an exact proper way to say that rules are written kind of goes out the window. And as I explained at the table, this is something that we won't always allow. This is not going to become a house rule for this particular way that we can do things. But I loved the idea so much, and I really appreciated what the party was trying to do. They were trying to infiltrate through disguise, to not draw any attention, to figure out what was going on, to find the prisoner or prisoners, and to create a distraction to get the prisoners out. It was brilliant. And the one thing that you guys needed from me was a little bend in the rule of, how exactly can we make this work? This is what we really want to do. And I think that, there are some other things you guys could have done to get the same effect, but you were using what you had. So why not? Right? So what happened is the party decided to split, and, everybody jokes about splitting the party. Sometimes there's a very good reason to, and this is one of them. They decided to split. They gave themselves a time limit with a little bit of prodding from me to give them a little bit more time, because the space was much more expansive than what I think they realized it was. And two of the party members decided to move through the encampment. They were able to make it in without any issue, and they found the prisoners. And they, on the spot, realized how much time they have left. They decided that what they needed to do was to get in a better position for the distraction to take place. They did that. So they were now split in 3 different locations. And the Raymond was sent down, and it was he touched the tent and ignited some sparks, and purely by the roll of the dice was able to get some tents to start catching on fire. And that's when all things turned interesting and started to change drastically for the members. In light of this next part of the conversation, if you do not want any spoilers over something that is game-changing for this party, now's a good spot to stop. But if you do want spoilers, or if you are happening to watch, or if what it looks like is in my chat as our players, I will pour myself a drink to commiserate what we are getting ready to talk about. After that drink, we will dive into what happened. So, yeah. who's watching the review before watching the episode. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. Sometimes this review contains a lot of spoilers, folks. That's just how it is. So now that the scotch has been poured, it is in a chilled glass that has been chilling for about 10 minutes. Yes, when a cat lights tents on fire, you know the whole story is going to be good. Not always. The tent started catching on fire, and I used a very loose percentage die based on a lot of things that was pure guesswork. Because this is something that was way off the rails for me, but in a really good way, and I wanted to see what happened. I was figuratively using between 35 and 65% as whether or not it would grow, if the fire would grow and spread, or if they were able to fight it. And I was playing in the favor of the players, because chance favors the brave, right? And the tent started to catch on fire. It didn't spread very much at first, and then it started to go. And then I had to do some quick thinking and mental calculations for, what happens when you're a kilometer away, or I guess it's 1,000 feet, so less than a kilometer. But what happens when you're 1,000 feet away from a fire at the near part of dusk? How much could you really see? Would there be a lot of commotion yet? Because they never really established much of a cue. They said that when the tents catch on fire, that's the cue. But they had a lot of other things they probably could have considered. Yes, you're watching now and reviewing, and you did also participate. That's what this is for. So they finally were able to. The other two, Susanna and Josh, were able to see the fire begin and the smoke, and see and sense some of the panic of a fire inside of an encampment that was seeming to spread. And I try to let it spread organically and naturally, again based on those percentage rules. So, by being split, Josh decided to use some of the skills that his character is really good at, and to distract the guards that weren't leaving, because he sensed that was a problem. Truth be told, that was a problem, and I think he was dealing with it the best way he possibly could. Meanwhile, Susanna was trying to use the advantage of the fire, and Josh distracting the tent that was being heavily guarded as the opportunity to free the prisoners. And this, my dear friends, is where things started to not go so well for the party. There was a lot of opportunities for Susanna to explain what they were doing, either before it happened or while it was happening. But I think that she was purely flustered with what all was going on, and the constant dice rolling, which is a part of the intent. A lot of what makes Dungeons and Dragons is the environment in this room. It's the ability for the dungeon master to set the tone and the pace of what is going on in a game, and then bring it into the real world. So by having, giving Susanna a few moments to talk, then looking at Josh and making him do a dice roll, then looking at Steven and making him do a dice roll, then coming right back to Susanna and looking for a response, it was adding to the chaos. And I was also switching, if you watched the video, I was switching who had to do things when, the timelines between, what was happening, what I would say, what hand motions were, and the intensity of my language. And those all actually for a purpose. I wanted to convey utter chaos and true separation, because that's what they were in as a position. They were a party that was already fragmented by one, because of Jonathan not being able to make it, that had then split into 3 different parts that all had independent roles to play that were invaluable to the success of the overall mission. The fire continued to spread, which wound up becoming a little bit of a hindrance after Susanna decided that she wasn't really going to be clear on what she was doing for Leosin and the other 3 prisoners. A small fight broke out between Leosin, because he honestly had been bound up for an entire day and blindfolded and told that he was going to be killed. Next thing he knows, he's hearing shouts of fire. He's hearing people, making a loud amount of noise, and his hands are being cut off. And he has this person wielding a knife in front of him with fire in the background. I really didn't have much of a choice but to make Leosin play I have an opportunity to do something to get free. The only thing I didn't do was make him cast any spells, which he could have, but I didn't want to go that far. I would have figured he would have been too fatigued to have done so, and fight or flight would have kicked in. But it wound up eventually working itself some of the way out as Leosin directed the other prisoners to run. He took off after them, and then Susanna took off after them. And because of the chaos, I had to infer the fact that Josh, who was busy and heavy at distracting the guards, would not have been able to see at that point because of the smoke, the fire, and the chaos, what was going on. So Susanna, Leosin, and the other 3 prisoners were able to make it through some skill challenges, which I thought was kind of interesting and fun. I'm growing to love the idea of skill challenges. I think they're really cool way to make things intense, make them awesome, and not really inflict too much penalty. The players have got to go often from point A to point B, and instead of just making it one really long, drawn out, okay, you can move 30 feet, they can move 45 feet, you catch up, now they move away. Doing a skill challenge is a really cool way to say, I'm going to let you get to B, but let's see what you have to go through to get there. Let's see how much of you makes it to B. And by that point in time, enough had been triggered that I introduced some horsemen, and the prisoners were recognized to have been free, leaving Susanna, Leosin, 3 prisoners, and Stephen with Raymond on top of a hill that was about 60 feet tall, looking down at Bella, played by Josh, who was quickly becoming surrounded by a sizable force, including 4 mounted cavalrymen. Now, I want to talk a little bit about all that happened next. So, I decided to give my players a lot of little trinkets when they were being created. This is something that's in the Dungeon Master Guide. I don't usually follow the rules to a T. I give them things that may be a little bit OP, but that's because I want them to have a good time, and I can account for the fact that, for example, my bard has the Rapier of Impotence because I built the Rapier of Impotence. I posted it on D&D Beyond, and I absolutely love it. I know what it's capable of, and I know if he's rolling hot, what to do, and I know if he's not rolling hot, which is usually the case, how to react, to give him both a fair chance as well as to let him have the fun of having something a little OP for his level. I also included things like healing potions because of the party makeup and things along those lines. But what Josh did was, being fully surrounded, is he used the Amulet of Kasuth, who is not even really a god, but he's kind of a god. He aspires to be a god, which it's basically like a Hail Mary. So by crushing the vial, either throwing it down the ground and having it break or whatever, and then saying the action word, which is a phrase, "O mighty Kasuth, consume us all," it casts Meteor Storm, or Meteor Swarm. Now, Meteor Swarm is a 9th level spell, and it has a radius effect of 40 feet. However, the furthest you could throw this thing away is 20 feet, which means that you're going to get hit by the Meteor Swarm no matter what you do. And that's what Josh did. He looked up at the party, who was trying to get to him, but he knew that this wasn't the right answer. He knew this wasn't the right time, and it wasn't the right call. And he activated the Amulet of Kasuth, and a grand total of, I think, something like 127 damage was rolled, as 4 meteors fell into the space, obliterating everything that was there. So, folks, let's talk about player death. So there's a lot of different ways that player death goes down. I think that there's a portion of the public that has the misconception. Oh, by the way, for all of this, the whole event with Bella and the Amulet of Kasuth, I added a highlight, which is like 3 minutes long, and a clip to my channel. You guys can watch those after you're done watching this, because why would you want to leave this awesomeness? But it's on my channel on Twitch. So you can definitely watch them just as a segment if you don't want to watch the whole 3.5 hour episode. But I encourage you to watch the whole thing because there's a lot of things that build up to it. But anywho, um, so, but anyway, I think there's a lot of people who watch D&D or sometimes play D&D that feel that Dungeon Masters as a whole are nothing but assholes that want to kill their players. And I'm here, as well as many others, going to continue to tell you that that is anything if not the furthest thing from the truth. Our job as DMs is to narrate the story of our heroes, the players, the adventurers, the people at our table, the people on our screens, the people that are coming to us to help them referee a game. In fact, a long time ago in a land far, far away, Dungeon Masters used to be called referees. So there's that whole aspect of the game that sometimes gets forgotten. Our job is to make sure that things happen logically and within reason and by the average percentage. And we also have our hand of fate that we're able to play. But I'm almost positive that most Dungeon Masters don't want to have a player die because, for the example of my players here, they invested time and a lot of time in building these characters. And, you know, I have a lot of people who I know that will spend a month and a half to build a character. And I'm not just talking about the dice rolls or figuring out, you know, just aspects of it, but thinking about the inner workings of these players. And if you think that a DM wants to kill a character, or that's what the goal of the DM is, or that's how the DM wins, that's not right. I mean, categorically, that's not at all right. DMs want their players to have fun. They want to have them experience things. Sometimes they want their players to experience change. And that's usually after conversations with the players themselves. Not that the player is bad, not that the character is bad, but they want to invoke something. They want to stir the heart. They want to stir the mind. They want to have their players see what they are capable of as a character and then as a person. There's a lot of introspection that happens with Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, I have a really good friend who I've known for a few years, who up until recently is she's a dungeon master part-time, but she's also a high school counselor, and she is able to get funding for a period of time to where she was able to actually run Dungeons and Dragons for a group of the students who had some emotional problems. And she said that, you know, some of the things that she was able to teach them, like conflict resolution and things along those lines, she could only have taught them through D&D. And it's things like that that tell you there's a lot of good in what a dungeon master does, and wanting to kill a character usually isn't a thing. I mean, there are times and places, and there are also DMs that is what they want. So don't think that not all of them don't. But I'm willing to wager that it's a very small fraction. But player death happens, and there's been a lot of talk, especially a lot as of late, when it comes to player death as to what to do. There's been some of the bigger names in Dungeons and Dragons have had to experience player death in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, heck, Matt Koval started with it in episode 1 of the chain, and it was the most epic thing that I've ever seen. And within the first 2 rounds of combat, one of the players was destroyed, like done. And it's something that happens. It's something that happens often, perhaps too often, but it still happens. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of different ways that it could go. And I know I'm rambling a little bit, but that's because of the topic, right? One of my players had a character who is dead for whatever reason. That player's no longer part of the party. And that's going to change how the party works. It's already having its effect in the conversation that followed. Kobrudlum Gidgewich brought up a really good point that, for all intents and purposes, his entire reason for being with this party on this mission may be gone. And, he did the right thing and said, DM, I'm going to need another hook. And so, it's something for me to work on. But that is going to have its effect. There's going to be anger. There's going to be hurt. I'm super happy that Josh didn't, stand up and run out of the house or, anything like that, which could happen at a table. I have heard time and time again that when you have something like this go on, that if the player gets visibly pissed off, Give them about 30 minutes. Let them walk away. Don't try to fix it because there's nothing you can do to make it better. There's nothing I could have done or said for the people at this table that were remaining after Bella did what he did that could have made it better for them. I mean, what could I have done? You know, and by being a DM and saying things like what you could have done to prevent this is, right? The whole antithesis as to why I'm doing this show is one of the worst things in the world that a DM could say at the table at that moment, because what that says is you fucked up as a player. That's not what happens. What happens is this. Now let's grow from it. Let's figure out what we're doing going forward and just make it happen. I spent some time going back and watching the VOD, especially over the last couple of days while I could have said roll better. You're right, I could have, but I say that to you every time you roll the dice, Josh. I mean, let's be fair. But, you know, I watched the faces of the players. I had a lot of computer issues over the weekend, which is why, for those of you that watch this stuff on YouTube, it went up later than normal. So, but I was able to watch that scene over and over and over again because I wanted to focus on the players and see if I can read what they were thinking. And it was pretty interesting to watch their faces. And I had to watch it like 4 or 5 times to pick up on all that I was looking for. But I was able to see what was one of the most interesting and beautiful things I think I've seen in Dungeons and Dragons in a long time. There was the person reacting, and then when they would have to do or say something and they would think about what their character would do or say, for a moment there were flashes of how their character would have reacted to what just happened, and then they would go back to laughing, and you know, it was, you know, back to the person. And yeah, you're right, Gitchwich, this is different because it was the player's decision, which I think does make it easier, right? It's not like it's not like he was in the fight with the half dragon and I struck him down because my dice were rolling hotter like they usually do. You know, that's something completely different. But you know, the thing is that dealing with a party member being gone means that the dynamic of the party, which is new, it's growing. We are only 4 episodes in, is going to be forever changed, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. So, yeah, that's the big spoiler: is that Bella is dead. He's no longer part of the party. Josh is spinning up a new character. It actually comes at a good time because Josh won't be here this week due to some other things. And you know, that's it actually works out really well. But him and I are going to be talking about a new character for him, spinning something up, and I'm almost positive, knowing Josh as long as I have, that it's going to be something awesome, epic, and probably not at all like Guts for you Wednesday crowd folk. So maybe he'll bring Puss, you know, Puss Tambost. I don't know, but we will talk about that. And the players eventually made it back to Greenest, collapsing on the inside of the keep. And that's what we'll pick up this week. They're going to have to convey to Akira, Jonathan's character, what has happened. I will say that right after we ended the stream, I immediately texted Jonathan, and him and I spoke about it a little bit today. So he does know. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The characters have now finished. Surprisingly, they finished an entire chapter in an evening. They actually finished off chapter 1 and moved through chapter 2 of the book. We are now in chapter 3. So one of the things I didn't say on stream, and I should have, I think I was so tired and just kind of wanting to end at a really good spot, was everybody except for, obviously, Josh's character gets to level. So the fun awesomeness of milestone advancement is that sometimes players die while all the others get a level. So the players will be at level 3 when we get back. They have quite a bit more to do. Yeah, the characters will still need to tell Akira, and I want to see how that plays out. It's going to be interesting because the fun part of that is watching. It's going to be watching Jonathan deal with playing a character who doesn't know something that he already knows and having to react to what he is finding out as though it's the first time. Yeah, Kira will figure it out eventually, right when he's just not there anymore. But it's gonna be interesting to see the dynamic of the party for the next few episodes. I will say that there is a very high likelihood that there will be a guest at the table this week. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be fun. We're going to see what comes of that. So that's something to look forward to, I think, is seeing what the remains of the party will do. How is the DM going to hook Quokrudalum back into the story? How are the players going to tell Akira? I personally think that had it gone slightly differently, that I could see Bella penning a note to Raymond's collar and sending it to Akira with like, "Hey, so and so's dead. Sorry, let's go get some food and go." Special guest will be Raymond. Yeah, you never know. So it's I think it's gonna be really telling to the remaining three, and then it's gonna be really interesting to see Josh fold in a new character. That's a lot of weight on Josh and a lot of weight on me, but that's kind of what we sign up for. So that's episode 4 in a nutshell. It was, in my opinion, really, really well done, minus one small part, but really well done by the players. I think that they handled the Raiders camp extremely well. I think that it is probably the best way they could have handled it. Running in always ends in a slaughter and a TPK, or total party kill. So that's a thing, right? And the route they wound up going, I think, was the best they could have done. The outcome was interesting, but it's happened. So where they go on from here will be part of the coolness of the story. So with that, I'm done recapping. You guys are free to ask questions, or I will probably ramble because I've already drank a little bit more scotch than I intended. But that's how I make it a good Monday, right? It's good scotch, good people, good talk. Fake fire in the background, fake heater over here. It's awesome. Why not? So the best way I could handle it equals suicide artifact. You guys, if you ever wind up going back there may be an artifact that you could find of Bella. We don't know. We'll have to see when and if we get there. But yeah, so episode 4 was interesting. They flew through an entire chapter. I didn't think they would make it through the entire chapter in the night, but they did. I don't think they're going to get through chapter 3 in one night. I think it's going to take them a couple of weeks. I'm going to say probably 3, based on what I see thus far. Chapter 3 is pretty intense. The things that are upcoming is a bit more of a throwback to Dungeons and Dragons versus some of the stuff we've been through. Yes, there's been a dragon, but there's a certain feeling that's going to happen. That's kind of cool that I really look forward to. This is the part of, for me, the entire campaign that makes or breaks the campaign is chapter 3. Because either the players absolutely love going through it and getting done with it, or they absolutely are done wanting to play the campaign. So we'll see. Who knows? Maybe in 4 weeks we start running Tomb of Annihilation. I'm not going to throw that out there. But there's a lot of things that could happen. So in absence of any questions at this point in time, thank you everyone for joining. Episode 4 was, well, it's over. So this week is episode 5. For those of you that haven't yet, we do have a Discord. If you type !Discord, it may work. I'm still trying to figure that stuff out in chat. That will get you a message with the link to our Discord channel where you can chat with the folks from Wednesday. So that's Troll Skull Syndicate, as well as the folks from Friday, and both Steven and I as DMs and not. Gidgewitch, let me know if you got that message. If it doesn't, that means I haven't programmed it right yet. So please go over to Gidgewitch's channel, give him a follow, so you could watch us on Wednesday nights as we continue with Waterdeep Dragon Heist. It came in a whisper. That's how it should be. And then next week, or the end of this week, we will pick up with another awesome story. Chapter 3 begins for Horde of the Dragon Queen. But then, again, thank you so much for hanging out. I will see you guys on Wednesday on Gidgewitch's channel, and then I'll see you here on Friday right around 8 p.m. until we don't know when. All right, y'all. Have a good night.